So now we're going from nobody watches fights on the app. We're going from that argument to the only reason DAZN, Serrano and Taylor beat ESPN and Shakur and Valdez is because they have 170 territories against ESPN's 1. Do they consider Mexico as part of the Americas, though? I'm sure they were watching that in Mexico on ESPN. I'm sure they were. So now you're changing the narrative from nobody watches the app to having to rationalize why the app is beating the network, the established network that's been in there from the late 70s. The app is the future. I want to big up Shakur Stevenson. He had a great weekend. It was a great weekend for boxing. ESPN done very well. We have a new star in the game. But Bob said women's boxing doesn't draw attention. So he made it a competition. And Eddie made it a competition as well. He said Serrano and Taylor was the bigger fight. And ESPN took the L. The W is legit for DAZN because there's strength in numbers. So you saying that, oh, well, you had 170 territories to ESPN's 1 means nothing. Especially if you are one of the people who said nobody watches fights on the app. I mean, what do you think is going to happen? America's not trying to market boxing outside of America. So if the technology is trying to market boxing to more territories than America, it only stands to reason that DAZN will start making events where you're going to come up second. Strength in numbers. We also have to look where women's boxing has come from. It came from the likes of Christy Martin having to be on Don King and Mike Tyson undercards and being successful doing that, to now headlining the MSG. And look, the way content is judged these days, you can't just watch the event in real time, all right? You have to look how it trends after. Tell me what did the trending after the event. Shakur Valdez or Taylor Serrano? And it's Taylor Serrano. That's what trended. When you see the reaction from certain men trying to downplay what Serrano and Taylor did, it just shows you the rage that not only men have for women, but there's a lot of women who have a lot of rage towards men. If your fear is that women's boxing is a threat to men's boxing, the fear is misguided. Both Katie and Amanda have worked very hard for this moment. And I often wonder why we're so behind the UFC and even wrestling. I know wrestling is choreographed and stuff, but it's still fighting. Just choreographed fighting. But they seem to embrace women, whether it's Ronda Rousey, Holly Holm, Amanda Nunes, etc. They seem to embrace the women. And our sport is not perfect. Boxing ain't perfect. It has had a lot of practices of racial discrimination in the past. But you have to understand, right? George Dixon became the first black athlete to win a world championship in any sports. Boxing provided that opportunity. And yes, I've heard some very silly statements from people like, we need to give Amanda and Katie 10 million apiece next time to be on parity with the men. Most men, either defending or challenging for world titles, are not making $10 million. If they don't generate that kind of revenue, then you suggesting that is nonsensical. So there are extremist views on either side. The truth is, the reason DAZN made a pitch for Eddie Hearn to head their boxing department, even before DAZN, Eddie had Matchroom USA. He had Matchroom USA, while the likes of Al Heyman started off really well with his deal with ITV, arguably the biggest television network in the country, if you didn't know. ITV and Fox and Sports, he put on Berman Stavern, Joe Joyce on the undercard, good fight, and Eubank the Girl headlining. Good card, but he was contracted to put on a certain amount of shows for the year in England, and he bailed after that one card. Bob Arum, he doesn't do anything anywhere else outside of America. In the 80s, he used to work with Cedric Kushner and put shows on in Sun City, South Africa, despite the protests from the anti-apartheid movement at that time. But he hasn't done nothing since. Bob Arum has got one female fighter on his books. Al Heyman has none. And Frank Warren has one, Raven Chapman. And I haven't heard shit from her since he signed her earlier this year. And we know his views previously on women's boxing. Challenge me. Prove me wrong. Eddie Hearn is the only global promoter in the world, and DAZN is the only global network in the world. How much have you watched that last DAZN card in Spain because of Sandor Martin? Well, Eddie's been developing that for a minute. He's done cards with Eddie Reynoso in Mexico. They've got Italian cards. Who knows, they might produce another Sandor Martin. Maybe someone even better than Sandor. When's the last time you heard of the Italians doing anything in boxing? And the Italians used to have a big presence on the boxing scene. I'm not talking about the American Italians from the 50s and 60s. I'm talking about in the 80s and 70s when it was basically impossible to go over to Italy and get a decision. They used to have a lot of European champions, the Italians back then, but they've kind of fell away from the pro boxing scene. The insulated approach from the power players in American boxing hasn't helped boxing as a whole. Like, the World Boxing Super Series was designed to give us unified and, if possible, undisputed champions. And we got one with Usyk, and a lot of people were laughing it off when Usyk won the final, saying, we don't care about that. He's not fighting anybody. He's the undisputed champion. And then you had Bob Arum, we're not putting our fighters in that tournament to go fight on another network, and then he signs up two of the winners, Josh Taylor and Inoue, only for Josh to become undisputed champion on ESPN, but basically get no coverage in Scotland where he started his career. And did ESPN even broadcast Inoue's last fight in Japan? I'm sure they didn't. The PBC finally put somebody in one of the tournaments, Andrew Tabiti, and you saw what happened to Tabiti, and Tabiti was a talent, got knocked out. Neither Al Haymon or Bob tried to get their networks to host the World Boxing Super Series in America, and the plan for the World Boxing Super Series was to put on women's tournaments as well. And girls like Alicia Baumgardner, Clarissa Shields have had to pack up their bags and make their way over here to pursue their careers. You know, you got Bob talking down women's boxing. You must wonder what Michaela Mayor is thinking. Like, what is it with Bob Arum where there's this protective wall that we can't reply to Bob no matter how crass or outdated or backward or stupid the things he says are? Because Michaela doesn't normally let things slide, right? But when it came to Bob, she seemed very reluctant to fire back, let me say. I was confused because it's not representative of Top Rank in this. I wish Bob had worded it different. What's that exactly? He's basically said you're there on the Top Rank roster to maybe fill a quota. Oh, look, we do have a woman here. We're not discriminate against women here. It looks like she works more alongside Todd DeBuff more than Bob. And they've done a good job for her. I'm not saying any different, but as far as Bob is concerned, it's just a token gesture. I don't know if Dude DiBella abandoned Amanda Serrano, but he's not there no more. After he pledged his allegiance to women's boxing, seems he's more interested in the Australian kid. So now, the only global promoter in the world, Eddie Hearn, has had to take over Lou's job and put Amanda on the big stage. Clarissa Shields has had to go to Sky for her big opportunity on the big stage. Alicia Baumgardner, she's had to go to the British guy who they're always slagging off about not doing nothing for boxing. He's supposed to be some white devil, but the two black sisters couldn't get no opportunity with the Black Messiah on the PBC. No opportunities at all, right? And let's not forget Jamie Mitchell. She won her title here against Shannon Courtney. And who promoted her next defense in America?
Eddie Hearn.
Black woman. But I've said it a few times now, but remember where you hear a lot of stuff first, right? Soon, the criteria to be an elite promoter is going to take you covering more than just the country that you're in. You're going to need to be able to cover at least 2 or 3 territories at the least. And the thing is, Bob should know this. Bob should know this. You know, Don King, he used to promote Nigel Benn fights over here with Frank Warren, and they fell out over Nassim Hamed. Don cleaned out Frank in court. Al Haymon should have continued with his situation with Pox and ITV. ITV's a beautiful platform in the UK to promote boxing cards. Beautiful. And they had it all set up for Al. They had a pay-per-view platform, which they've since taken down, and everything. They have multiple channels all throughout Freeview. When you're talking about boxing in ITV, you're talking about prime Mike Tyson, Frazier, Ali, whoever in the 70s, and the BBC, to be honest, and the BBC. You know, Hagler, Hearns, Hunnigan, Curry McCrory, Nunn versus Tate, all them great events. Leonard, Hearns, Duran, Reg Guttridge commentating. That's golden years British boxing, in my opinion. ITV bought the overseas heat. BBC was more domestic, which the cartel controlled. Mickey Duff, Astaire, Duff, Barrett, and Terry Lawless. The cartel controlled that. You know, when Al started and he was putting them shows on terrestrial television, like when Caleb won the belt against Uskatagi, Thurman, Pacquiao on terrestrial television, Danny Garcia, it was like, whoa, this is a major power move, and then boom, out. And in hindsight, the UK is a very good territory to have a foothold in. And to give it up like that, because as far as I heard, it was his decision. It wasn't like somebody said, no, we don't want Pacquiao versus Broner, or the Uskatagi Caleb fight. No, it was like, yo, this is good. This is really good. Danny Garcia, were the Charlos on? I can't remember. But yo, I tell you who was happy. Eddie Hearn and Frank Warren were happy that you just gave up like that. I tell you that now. And this is why I'm still sticking with my theory with MTK and Probellum. I tell you what, that John Real Casemiro is a shady character. Like, he failed to turn up at the weigh-in December 2021 in Dubai to defend his bantamweight title against Paul Butler. And last week, the fight was supposed to be rescheduled at the Liverpool Echo Arena, but Casemiro got himself stripped of his belt. He was found to have broken the rules by using a sauna in order to make weight. So Paul Butler went on to defeat Jonas Sultan. Apparently it was a really good performance. And he was interim champion, and now they've elevated him to full champion, and rightly so. Casemiro is dodgy. He's a dodgy guy. Now, once again, you've got to consider the short time they've been in business. They've got Butler, Sonny Edwards, Nonito Donaire, who Butler wants to fight, world champions. Stanionis has an interim WBA belt. They've got Regis Prograis, a top American fighter, Donny Nietes, Jack Catterall. They've got women like Hannah Gabriels, Dina Thorsland, Estelle Mosley, Tony Yoka's other half, an international roster, a lot of women there. So they were planning to be accessible to a whole load of territories, to the women's market, and wherever needed supplying. They weren't just going to focus their efforts in one territory. You know, some of us have seen Richard Schaefer at the York Hall, working with David Hay, ringmaster. He's been staking out the UK and Europe for a little while. He knows the money is not limited to one location. That's old-fashioned thinking. Got himself a broadcaster, Eurosport, in a short time. Short time. You see, I believe legally it would have been hard to pin Kinahan to Probellum. It was easier to do it with MTK. Way easier, because you already heard testimony from fighters saying that they are advised by Daniel Kinahan. But Probellum was going to be a different kettle of fish. Like, Tyson Fury did not denounce a relationship with Daniel Kinahan. He didn't. His contract's up with Bob Arum. And look, we could have been witnessing the announcement that, yo, he's going over to Probellum on Eurosport. But they've lost that deal now. Since the US started putting the pressure on Probellum, they've lost that deal. 3 fights in. It was a 5-card deal. They wouldn't let Matthew Macklin fly over to do work on Taylor and Serrano, I believe. They seized his rights to fly. Daniel Kinahan, they seized up a lot of his assets. A lot of people he's associated with, their assets have been frozen up. People are now being warned to disassociate themselves with him. And when it was just MTK, they weren't doing all that. I don't believe the US government just all of a sudden decided to go after Kinahan with such vigor. I just don't believe that. You know, some people are thinking, Eurosport is not a big enough platform to put Tyson Fury on. Listen, Vladimir Klitschko had 2 world title defenses on Eurosport live. One was against Leopai, and I can't remember who the other one was against. What does it matter? As long as the broadcaster has a decent reach, and then you have a franchise athlete, off you go. David Hay, when he made that comeback, he fought on the Dave channel, who ain't did a day's sport in their life. They've done huge viewing figures for his 2 fights against bums. Eurosport is already an established platform for boxing. It has been for years. Like, we used to get Pro Box, Screen Sport on the platform. We used to get all types of fights on there. Ben versus Eubank, the first fight, that was live, and then they'd do delayed recordings on ITV. Eubank fought on there a few times. Ben fought on there a few times. Chris Pyatt, Herbie Hyde. We'd get international action from the States. All types of fights on there. All types. Eurosport, there's nothing wrong with Eurosport as being the broadcaster. Nothing at all. It's just been sleeping for a little while. PROBELLUM were literally signing a fighter every day. Every day. And I believe they did too much too quickly. Not that it necessarily would have made a difference, but I think they've done too much too quick. When people sense the competition is going to eat into their profits, they start panicking. Like when Al Heyman started buying up all them TV slots. What did he buy up? Bounce, CBS, NBC, Fox, ABC, Spike. And that led to panic from Top Rank and Golden Boy, yeah? Now, they might have been fronting the lawsuits. Yeah, we're going to take lawsuits out on this guy. But you know HBO were fully backing them lawsuits because he's cutting into their profits. He's putting on boxing free to air. And they were asking, how can you pay them site fees and pay them fighters so much? And they just couldn't get a grip on it. And it had the industry shook. And there's been an after effect that's lingered on after that. Like Dana White just the other day was saying boxers are overpaid. The established players, they can't have that again. They can't have that. They wanted Heyman out. I wonder if people understand that. Don't take it lightly what I'm saying. They wanted him out. They wanted his head served on a platter. I'm not here saying boxing's a business and you have to understand. I'm just telling you the reality of what was happening. Yeah? Members of the media, they had their daggers out. Like, got to put you out there, guys. Steve Kim, Doug Fisher, what do they call him? The demographic, referring to the predominantly African-American fans supporting the PBC and their fighters. The most ignorant set of boxing fans ever, biased, and yo, they were going for it. Golden Boy, the emails that were circulating through the promotion, WBO, were supporting Bob in his lawsuit and said they were going to testify whatever they said they had against Al Heyman in order for Bob to win that lawsuit. This is all facts and documented. They wanted him out. Like I'm saying, I want to repeat, this isn't Beats trying to get on his high horse. Yeah, I know the business and you don't. You know, this is a boxing's a business. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying when you get to that end of big business, they're not fucking around. If you're cutting into their money, they're not fucking around. On the Panorama documentary on the BBC, they said MTK were basically charging way below the standard market price for managerial and advisory services. Carl Frampton said they didn't actually charge him for management. That's what he said. Why do you think they're getting so much fighters from all these different locations? I tell you what, there's going to be a lot of fighters, whether they're signed to MTK or PROBELLUM, bad times for them. A lot of them are not going to fight again. I guarantee. You see what Billy Joe Saunders said? If Daniel Kinahan isn't managing me, I'm not fighting no more. And he meant it. He meant it. And you're going to see a lot of these fighters, unless they're forced to go back in the ring, a lot of them are going to be very reluctant to go back in the ring. Especially those who aren't anywhere near the big money. You know, it's been said that Daniel Kinahan cleared a whole lot of obstacles for Tyson Fury to make that comeback. Because I don't think people realized the shit he was in. Now, I'm not going to go through all of it. Maybe that's why he's retiring. Maybe that's why he announced his retirement. He's done with it now. No Daniel Kinahan, no Tyson Fury, no Billy Joe Saunders, no perhaps a lot of boxers. I was listening to Off the Ball, very good Irish channel. And Serrano and Taylor, they could run it again immediately. Croke Park in Ireland, which has an 82,000 capacity. And they're talking about Katie possibly filling it out. And they would know. They would know. Katie's drawing power in Ireland is second to none. The only reason she hasn't fought over there defending her world titles is because of the, let's just say, gang land issues that have went on at boxing events, etc., etc. And that's the only contentious point that stands in the way of her possibly fighting there. They were also saying Serrano could drop back down to super feather, perhaps go for the undisputed title. They're running through the options, and there might not be no rush to take the rematch straight away. Let it build a little. It makes you think, though. People are saying, well, 1.5 with 170 territories is not that impressive. They're not asking how big she would be if she was defending her titles in Ireland. Because if she was able to defend her titles in Ireland, she headlines every time. There's no need to put her on no AJ undercards or anything like that. She headlines every time. And I'm not saying necessarily it would be an 82,000 sellout at Croke Park. But every time she goes over there, she headlines. She's massive over there. But she hasn't been able to fight over there. And I don't like to do ifs, coulda, shoulda, wouldas. But I think that's a fair one to think about. So the WBC are apparently seeking a decision about Tyson Fury retiring. What is there to seek? He publicly declared he's retiring, didn't he? He said that's it. Now here's the thing, right? Frank Warren is saying, I don't know why the WBC are trying to rush him. Nobody can tell Tyson Fury what to do. He'll make a decision in his own time. They should back off. Frank said there's no mandatory anytime soon. No, there's no mandatory because they've still got Deontay Wilder ranked number 1, even though he hasn't won a fight since 2019 and hasn't been champion since early 2020. But here's the thing. Like, I know Tyson Fury is an impulsive person, but if you're an impulsive person, then sometimes you have to answer for being impulsive rather than people who are a little more shrewd and calculated about blabbing off. If Tyson Fury, post-fight, after knocking out Dillian, had just went on about his business and not said nothing, then the WBC wouldn't be pressing him. Because like Frank said, they still got Deontay Wilder ranked number 1, and he's not a mandatory. And I would hope he's not about to be mandated. But, you know, if you're going to say you retire, what goes with retirement if you're a belt holder? You vacate the belt. But he hasn't vacated the belt. And once again, it's the mind games, I guess. You know, Fury's too clever for us, keeps us guessing, and, you know, he plays us around on the string, clever Fury, and all that shit there, yeah? When a lot of us as boxing fans see is somebody who doesn't want to fight the winner out of AJ and Usyk. Some people are saying, he's just avoiding Usyk. No, he's avoided AJ as well. Why does everybody think that he's keen to fight AJ so much? I wonder why. You know, some of us like seeing undisputed champions. You know, it doesn't always come down to hate for your fighter, fanboys. It really doesn't. Some of us want to see people go for undisputed. And he's making no commitment to that, but he's holding on to the belt, but saying he's retired. And the WBC are not helping by having Wilder in the number 1 slot. I mean, they don't have a mandatory there, but yet they've pissed around with the Dillian situation at number 1 and mandatory for so long, only to have Deontay Wilder at number 1. And he hasn't committed to a comeback or anything. Months after he got battered last year. I mean, you know, your eye tests and your fantasy matchups are not a good barometer for greatness. They're not. They really ain't. Like, greatness is somebody who can consistently push to defend their undisputed titles or try and unify the belts to become undisputed. Somebody who wants to go on a title run. You see, the heavyweights, they don't have the luxury of what, let's say, light middles, light heavies, middleweights, and lightweights, flyweights can do. They can go on multiple and become multiple weight champions. If you're an 18-year-old lad and you're 6'5", let's say 17 stone, unless you chop off a leg, you're never really going to make cruiserweight comfortably, are you? You never are. You're going to be a heavyweight for life, and a heavyweight has to go on a run. He's got to be in that one weight class and go for long title runs to establish greatness. That's the requirement. That's a standard requirement for heavyweight boxing. And no one is exempt from it. To me, holding on to the belt, it just feels like Fury doesn't want anybody else just to get on with their career. He just wants the attention. He just wants to attention seek all the time. There are people out there who want to try and give boxing fans like myself what I'm asking for. They want to go for undisputed. They want to go on a title run like Muhammad Ali, Mike Tyson. They want to do this. And it's almost like Fury feels, well, I'm not going to do that, so let me throw an obstacle in your way so you can't do it. Let me hold on to the belt, but say I'm retired. Fury and his fans, I don't think they want to accept that when he beat Vlad in 2015 and then lost all the belts for his own doing outside the ring, didn't give Vlad his rematch, boxing fans, we got on with it. Wilder was doing his thing, and AJ, he unified 3 belts, regenerated money into the game, big gates, big crowds, good fights, and we got on with it. And I have no doubt if Fury sticks to this retirement by vacating the belt, the same thing will happen again. Yeah, of course, there was a few sycophants out there saying AJ is only winning belts because Tyson Fury's not fighting no more, but that wasn't AJ's fault. Why are you guys always blaming other things apart from Fury for the inconsistencies and gaps in his resume and his career? Another thing about Tyson Fury fans and pro-Tyson Fury media is their inability to compartmentalize. Yes, when he stepped up, he has fought very well, but he hasn't put together a cohesive resume like a great heavyweight champion. When you put together a cohesive resume like a true heavyweight champion, you leave yourself at risk to get beaten. They keep talking about the Wilder wins. 2 Wilder wins in his comeback, which started in 2018, 4 years ago, and now he's contemplating retirement or has retired. You have no perspective. You have none at all. He hasn't unified a strap since his comeback. Not one.